Julie Grahame. I'm a photographer consultant and I've been working in the photo business for more than 3 decades and been collaborating with Janette Beckman for most of that time. I live here in New York, was born in London.
I'm Janette Beckman. I'm a photographer and I'm sitting here with my friend Julie Grahame, who discovered my archive. And I've been taking photos for more than 40 years of bands, fans, people on the street, demonstrations, fashion, all sorts of things. How did we meet, Julie?
How did we meet? Through the mists of time.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so you had been living in New York since the 80s, and I moved here in the early 90s, so I'd been working for a photo agency in London, and I wangled myself over to the New York office, where we had an incredible collection, huge archive of music and celebrities and news from the early days of photography. And there was just one music photographer that I really wanted that was with another agency, and that was you. So I remember wangling my way into your life via another photographer who was a mutual friend of ours. And you very graciously invited me over and allowed me to start looking through your archive, in which we rediscovered some absolutely fantastic bands. From Haircut 100 to The Clash.
Right.
Images you'd forgotten about, things that you hadn't noticed before in some of the work.
Totally. I mean, I'll never forget that day, and I was like, I've got some boxes of negatives in the basement because I moved to America in 1983, and I brought all my negs in boxes, and I honestly hadn't really opened them since because I immediately was sort of embedded in hip-hop and various other projects I was doing. So I dragged all these things out of the basement and Julie started going through them. She was like, oh my God, look at this, Steve Jones on stage with The Clash and Jimmy Percy, do you know that this is, and I was like, oh, I don't really remember. I probably did that in 1979, it was a while ago. So,
but in the meantime, you were with a photo agent at the time who didn't come around and look in your basement and care about your archive. And I think, again, like a lot of aspects of your archive are all really important, but when you go back and look again and you start to see things that are coming back into fashion or that people are more interested now. I know you've worked with brands who've seen perhaps your picture of someone who's wearing a particular kind of trouser or shoe, and they want to bring that into their marketing and so on and so forth. It's an interesting way to keep the work current.
Yeah, I mean, lucky me, for instance, Maria Grazia, who was the creative director at Dior, was a huge punk fan. I didn't know, and she's also a feminist. She likes working with women photographers, and her first collection, somehow I was introduced to her and she hired me to photograph her first collection, and it was sort of a side story. I went to Paris and I was going to be there for a week, and I brought my assistant Gudrun, who's a really good friend, and I had to meet Maria, and she was like, so what do you want to do while you're here? And I was like, oh, because I thought she was going to tell me what to do, give me what she wanted. And just in my brain flashed this idea, I want to photograph you finish making the collection and everything that goes towards the final show as if I'm backstage at a punk concert. And she's like, okay. And I was like, and I'm doing everything in black and white. And she's like, okay, I'm giving you your total access thing. And off I went. And I photographed, 12-hour days. I photographed the tailors sewing the sequins and the models smoking cigarettes on their go-sees and the Stephen Jones making the hats and everything. And it was really an incredible experience. And Gudrun was there downloading everything because it was all digital. And I couldn't get the PR department to come and look at what I was doing. I was kind of nervous, but then I'm thinking, oh, well, I'm doing what I'm doing, and that's it. And finally, the very last day, after the show, after the celebrities, after, the fabulous dinners and all the incredible stuff, she's showing the collection to the buyers from Japan and everywhere around the world. And the PR guy, Sebastian, just comes up and taking photos and whispers in my ear, I love everything you've done. And I was like, oh my God, thank goodness. I mean, you know, it's very rare that you get given an opportunity.
Right, but you got that access because she'd seen your work and been a fan of your work.
Yeah. And in a couple of years, I think 1 or 2 years later, she brought me to London to photograph her other collection, the new collection, on the street in London where I'd photographed those punks, which was pretty amazing. Kentish Town, you know, looking for the walls, and it was crazy because I was shooting in a way that I never shoot before, because I'd turn around, there are like 30 people behind me. I'd do a shot and everybody's looking at it on the monitor, and I'm like...
Right, but it's only been how many years since you've been able to do that? Like, originally, no one got to see anything at all until you'd gone home, put the film in for processing, sweated all night, worried that you hadn't got it.
Right. It's true.
So, you know, when we first met, you'd be shooting a certain number of images, you were limited by how much, you know, budget you had, perhaps. No digitizing, no scanning. We used to make copies of everything. We had to make dupes, as we called them, and send those out to the magazines and newspapers and so on.
Yeah, I mean, and that was the great thing also, that I could have another string of income, because always useful, a freelance photographer. You know, I meet Julie, and Julie's like, oh, we'll syndicate your photos. And I was like, oh, that sounds good.
Music pictures are still out there for licensing, and there's still a robust industry out there.
Totally. And those pictures that didn't really mean, well, I wasn't taking them because I thought they were going to be important. I mean, I never... So this is where I get into the women photography. So, you know, back in the day when I was working for Melody Maker, which was probably from 1976 to the end of 82, there were only 3 women on for Melody Maker. One of them was a writer called Carol. The other one was my dear friend and incredible writer, Vivian Goldman, and me. And I was the second photographer. So Tommy Sheehan, lovely chap, would get the glamorous trip to, you know, Texas to photograph Led Zeppelin. And then they would say, oh, you know, there's this punk band. And all these bands were really unknown. I would get all that, the scraps, I guess, you know, and they didn't really take me seriously, I don't think, but I was there, and, you know, we didn't know that, you know, these bands were going to be famous. They weren't famous. I mean, actually, when I went to photograph The Clash in Milan, they were famous by then, and that was an incredible trip to go and photograph, you know, Joe Strummer in a basement of a bicycle stadium, and it was really amazing. But yeah, it was hard. And also, I was an art school person, and I think that didn't jive well with the rock. Melody Maker was kind of a rock paper at the time, and they just looked at me like, oh, it would have something to say. I was always wearing Converse, and, you know, they go, oh, you're wearing your pajamas. I mean, it was just always something, and I just used to brush it off because I wanted to go and take photos of Boy George or whatever. It was just an interesting time, and at the time I wasn't that bothered about it, but in retrospect, you kind of realize that, you know, you were always the second.
Did that change when you moved here, as far as, you know, maybe being the only woman, or were you maybe the only woman, but it was a little easier perhaps to shoot here?
It changed 100%, because for a start, I was British. I came here and I was photographing the hip hop community, and everybody was so nice to me. I can only say, you know, I would go out and meet, you know, Africa Bambaataa in the Bronx, and they would just be like, well, you ain't from here, are you? And I'd be like, no, I'm from London. They'd go, oh, what's that like? And we'd talk. And, you know, I was different from everybody else. I had a different accent. I was a woman, and, you know, it really changed. And I started working for a Sunday newspaper here, magazine, Daily News. And I was getting all these jobs, photograph Keith Haring in his studio for a day, you know, go and photograph Elmore Leonard, the famous writer and screenwriter. And it was great. And I was doing all these hip hop covers for these tiny little labels like Def Jam and Sleeping Bag that had these amazing artists. And, you know, I've always been a bit of a music fanatic, so they would just keep sending me more and more artists. I mean, you know, I'd go around once with my portfolio and then they're like, yeah, you can do it. Send her another artist. You know, send LL Cool J. Who's he? Oh, he comes round to my studio with Bill Adler, who was the PR at the time. And it was just a young kid with a boombox. And he just put a boombox on his shoulder. Took the picture. I was always, you know, I had my little studio set up. And that picture, he's still using it to this day on T-shirts for his tour T-shirt, which, you know, it's really gratifying.
You grew up with sort of Motown, is that right? Was there any iconic imagery from your interest in music early on that sort of stayed with you or inspired you?
Yeah, I mean, when I was growing up, well, in the beginning, you know, there was Adam Faith and Cliff Richard, and that was the British music scene. And then I remember when Motown came to London, the Motown Review, and there was a picture, probably like the Evening Standard, of these people standing in Trafalgar Square, the Motown Review, you know, Supremes, and there's a whole bunch of them, and they looked so glamorous and different to me, and, you know, I kind of became obsessed with that music, and I was going to Woolworths, you know, with my pocket money every Saturday to buy the latest Motown 45s. And, you know, I think that really started my really passionate interest in music. And then my cousin, Ian, who was a year older than me, was going on a trip around the world, and he gave me his record collection. He was more of a rocker, so I got like Pink Floyd and, you know, Buffalo Springfield and all of these, and I was, you know, I had my little record player in my bedroom and I was playing all this stuff. And I guess I've just always been interested in music.
Music and culture, it's more than just music.
Yeah, and the culture. And, you know, I've always been very interested in the fans as well as the bands, because especially if you go and photograph a band, there's always downtime, and I'm always fascinated by what people are wearing. And, you know, the style, and the styles change, and that's a really important thing to me, photographing that, because also the fans can be in a band next week. You just don't know.
But again, that's part of your superpower. You're making the fan feel almost as important as the person that they're there to see on stage. And that's how you get such a great dynamic with your subjects, famous or otherwise.
Yeah, I think that is my superpower, because I was really shy as a kid in school, and I was in the same school from the age of 3 to 17, so I was always really super shy, King Alfred School, and nobody knew who I was. And then I came out and I was like, I'm not going to be this shy person anymore. I went to college, became an artist, and, you know, and it's really true. I mean, having a camera is an introduction. You can walk up to anybody on the street and say, I really like your sneakers, can I take a picture of you, or whatever. And it makes the person feel good, it makes you feel good, you get a shot. And it really is my superpower, actually. It's just building that relationship with somebody in a very short time. And I would say a lot of the images I've made have been made in a short time. It's not like I've spent days following these people around, or even shot rolls and rolls of film, because I was trained to shoot on film, and it cost money. So every roll of film had a price tag, and then you'd have to develop it, and then you'd have to make a print, and then, you know, that all mounts up. So it's been good now digital. I don't need to shoot 100 pictures to get one, because I'm trained, you know, I could shoot 30 and get, hopefully, one really good one.
Okay, so Janette, we're going to talk about a few of your images.
Cool.
Let's kick off with Run DMC, who you photographed here in the States, in Hollis, Queens.
Right.
You tell us a bit about that?
Sure. Well, that Run DMC picture, which happens to be one of my favorites, actually, of all time, I was commissioned by an English magazine called The Face, pretty iconic, Neville Brody, who was still one of my big mates today. He asked me to go photograph this band called Run DMC. I was already living in New York at the time, and he gave me a phone number, and the phone number turned out to be Jam Master Jay's house. So I called phone number, bearing in mind, you know, no cell phones, no computers, and Jay picks up the phone, and he was like, "Oh yeah, okay, you know, come meet me next week at the subway station." So we go, I meet him next Tuesday at the subway station, and we walk down the street, and there's this bunch of guys hanging out in the dappled sunlight, and they look amazing. They just look amazing. And I was working with a Hasselblad at the time. I always had my Hasselblad, and I had it already loaded, and they were like, "You know, what do you want us to do?" And I was like, "You look great, just get a little bit closer together." And maybe that might have been, I don't know, like the 6th frame I took. You know, I took a light reading, and there's something about that picture. It's so natural, and they're there with their friends on the street that they live on. I mean, it's kind of a moment, a real moment in time, and not to mention, you know, what they're wearing, because they're wearing Adidas, they're wearing Kangols, Gazelles, and they just look so cool, you know, and I don't know, I really love that picture, actually.
It's interesting in how some of the details in your pictures have come back round, that people are interested not necessarily in the bands, but also in those vintage Adidas trainers, and how, in a way, that's kind of kept people interested in your work. Were you ever sent off to shoot someone else on a street corner, perhaps back in the UK? And if you had, how would that have been different for you?
Well, back in the UK, when I started working for Melody Maker, I was doing everything on a street corner. In fact, I will say to this day, I spent quite a lot of time looking for the perfect wall. I did a shoot with a young saxophone player, Eben Dorsey, who's amazing, by the way, a couple of days ago. And I'd already scouted the perfect walls in my neighborhood, because the walls are always changing. You know, one minute it's got graffiti on it, and someone put a garbage bin in front of it. So, yeah, I mean, when I photographed Paul Weller and Pete Townsend, I mean, I had the idea to photograph them in front of the Marquee Club, because it was apparent that both of them had probably played there. And that was really like another moment in time in a way, because it was for the cover of Melody Maker, and Paolo Hewitt was the writer, and he had gone to school, I think, with Paul Weller. They were both from Woking. And it was Paul meeting his idol, which was Pete Townsend from The Who. So, same thing, you know, I turn up and they're standing there. They just said hello to each other, and they're standing on the curb. And it was the same vibe, you know, and they were like, "Oh, what do you want us to do?" And I'm like, "You look great." And I took the picture, another Hasselblad picture. And there's something about the way they're styled, like Weller looks so fly. He's, you know, he's just got it. He's got a suit on he just looks amazing. And Townsend's like a little more disheveled, you know, he's got a raincoat on, and he looks like he really doesn't really care. And, you know, it was definitely, I think the title of it was The Punk and the Modfather, which I thought was a great title for, you know, that was the title that the story ran under. And in fact, that interview's just been published again right now in a little book, Paolo, and it's got my picture of them with Paolo Hewitt standing next to them, which is kind of cool. But, you know, it's another moment in time, hero, you know, meeting the next one coming up.
But it's also another moment in time. You've got the, is it Son of Stiff poster in the background in the marquee window, just the whole marquee billboard that, you know, for our generation, it was so instrumental.
Totally.
So Weller Townsend, I think you can see in that portrait that Paul Weller's with his hero, and Townsend doesn't actually care that much.
Right.
How long did you have with them to make that?
Not long. I mean, Paolo wanted to get on with the interview. We were doing the interview around the corner, and, you know, maybe, I don't know, 10 minutes. And most of my pictures, I don't need a lot of time. And because I don't come with a whole set of assistants and lighting, and honestly, I mean, my hero in college, when I was at the London College of Printing, which is called something else right now, was this guy, August Sander. And he was a German photographer that he photographed German people on the street in the late 1800s, early 1900s, you know, like the butcher and three guys standing on a pathway. And they're really simple photos. And I loved this book so much that I stole it from the library of college because I had it out for so long, it was too late to bring it back. I'd had it out for like a year and a half. So I still have it, but it's a really simple way of taking photos. And
I think we sort of joke about it, but it is kind of your superpower, is getting into somebody in a very short period of time. And I've seen you do that both with musicians and with celebrities, but also when you shoot just out on the street doing a demo. I've seen the way you can work an entire crowd and get people to trust you. So we've done Weller Townsend now. Let's move on to Salt and Pepper.
That was actually, I was living here, and that was an assignment for some British long gone teen magazine, and they didn't even have a record label when I took that picture. It was kind of crazy. So I had them, I was living on Avenue B and 8th Street at the time in a kind of, you know, then sketchy neighborhood. And I was like, oh, just meet me, you know, on the corner. So here come these two young women. And it was a hot summer's day, you know, like a real New York hot summer's sweaty day. And I was like, let's just walk around in the neighborhood. And I photographed them in front of this incredible mural of this lady dancing, and they started dancing, and then we went to the deli, and I've got a picture of them, you know, drinking sodas outside the deli. And we just got along really well. We had a really nice afternoon. Maybe we spent an hour or so, maybe 2 hours just wandering around and chatting, and they were like, well, we're going to put our first record out. Would you take our picture for our record cover? I was like, sure. And that led to me working with them. You know, I did that iconic picture. If you were going to go dressed as a rapper, a female rapper, you would be wearing the 8-ball jackets that they're wearing in that iconic picture. And
so there was no publicist? Nobody had to approve you? No one looked at your portfolio?
No, nothing. I mean, it was great. And those jackets that they're wearing in that picture were designed by Dapper Dan, who is really the iconic, you know, designer for hip hop. And I didn't know that at the time, but I thought they were fabulous jackets. And, you know, I photographed them for Hip Hop 50 at a Rock the Bells concert, literally, and then for a cover of Time Out, actually, last year, the year before last. So, you know, and they're like, Janette, hey, and it's kind of cool, you know.
That's 40 years later.
40 years later. I know, we were photographing them for the cover of Time Out, and I was trying to get them, we were in Queens.
Okay, so this is really different now, because for the cover of Time Out, you really had a short period of time. Mm-hmm. You had literally no control over the environment that you were shooting in, or really any understanding of how long you might
know
get.
This story, right? Yeah, so I was photographing them for the cover of Time Out, and we were in Queens in Long Island City. And I saw this, you know, there's the freeway, and I was like, this is so cool, it's so Queens, there's a train going over, and this and that and the other. And I was like, just come outside, it really is like 1 minute walk. And they're like, Janette, it's too hot. We don't, you know, these days we don't do these things. Mm-hmm. You know, we just want to do it, we'll just do it here in the cafeteria. And it was so ugly, the wall was so horrible. And I was kind of like, please, please. They're like, no, we're not going outside. And then, you know, they had their manager who'd already told me that you can't do that now. It was just a different time, you know. And even though, you know, we were all pleased to see each other, they were just like, nope, we're not doing it. We performed last night, we're too tired, we don't want our makeup running. I'm like, oh, whatever. So, you know, the difference between the two shoots.
Yeah.
I mean, I really had a lot of autonomy back in the day.
Let's go back to the UK now. We were going to talk about your portrait of the Specials. It's the whole band, right? 7, 8?
Yeah, that was actually on the Seaside tour, and it was an assignment for Melody Maker. And I always loved the Specials. The Specials, to me, are like a brilliant band because, well, I love the music. I love the mixture of ska and, you know, punk and whatever else they mixed in there. Plus it was super political. I mean, Ghost Town is like such an amazing song, and it's so relevant to this day. You can't really, I don't know. And we were in this little Airbnb by the seaside. I can't remember exactly which seaside. It was somewhere on the south coast. And it was raining, and I knew, you know, Melody Maker, they never told me what to shoot, but there was always the thing. You had to get, you know, a cover shot if you were doing a cover, a picture of the whole band, and individual pictures, and then live pictures if you were lucky as well. And I was like, oh shit, it's raining. This is my only moment to get the whole band. And so I dragged them outside, and they're not happy. They don't look like happy campers in this picture. They're all, you know, it's drizzling. They've got it, you know, they're looking good, but it's just so English somehow. And I kind of love that, you know, it's just such an English moment. They're all lined up, and I wanted the seaside decorations. And I just feel like, I don't know, I was just spent a lot of time trying to get bands to come out and stand against the wall, or kind of just for me to get my shot. But I kind of like that picture because it's not like, they're not really posing even, which, you know, is my dream when people don't pose too much.
So, I mean, if you juxtapose the number of people in the Run DMC and Posse picture, and then you've got the Brits all spread out against their cold, wet background.
Plus, it's really challenging because you've got people with super dark skin and people with super light skin, and for a photographer, that's incredibly challenging. And then later, you know, when I was in the darkroom trying to make prints, it's not easy, but, you know, it was great training for me because I knew how to photograph black skin when I came here. It was kind of incredibly useful.
What year is that? Specials? Late 70s?
It was, maybe 1980, 81, something like that.
And it was not, wasn't it recently collected by the National Portrait Gallery in London?
Oh, yes it was. I forgot about that. Yes, it was.
So now in the collection of a major institution in the UK, which is fabulous.
Who knew?
So fast forward, we thought we'd end these images with Jose James, who's a current jazz musician. Tell us a bit about your relationship with him.
Jose is an amazing singer. He has an amazing, unique voice. I mean, we've been working together for 12 years, and maybe more. The first picture I took of him was for a British magazine called Jocks and Nerds, which was a free, fabulous magazine. It really was amazing. And it was about music and culture. And that was my first assignment for them, and I ended up being their New York correspondent, so it was good. But Jose and I got along really well. In fact, photographed him right here against that door. And then he was on Blue Note, and he asked if I would do his album cover, and I was like, yeah, I'll do it. So I think I've done all his album covers since then, and he usually puts one out, you know, every year. And he's amazing. I really respect him as an artist because he changes. Every album is different. He does, you know, one minute he's doing something that's referencing Erykah Badu, then he's done a Billie Holiday. Right now the current album is called Revenge of the Dragon. We just shot, the album just came out. We shot it here on my street. And Jackie Chan had this particular car. We borrowed a car from somebody in the neighborhood, and, you know, he's standing outside on the street, literally up the block. And we've always worked together just really simply. Like, we'll have an idea, or he you know, he wants to do a tribute to someone like Malik Sidibe, the African photographer. And we just get a piece of fabric and go out and do it wherever we are in LA. And it's always, you know, just he and I. We don't have assistants. We don't have prop people, or, you know, he'll just arrive with his couple of different outfits on hangers, and we just get it done. And that's a great way of working, and that relationship and friendship that we have, I think we trust each other, and it's kind of amazing. And we edit together, and of course now with digital it's kind of great because I could do the shoot here, come back, look at it on the computer, and he's just like that one, and that one. That's it. Boom, we're done. So, you know, I mean, I think those early days of training for Melody Maker and the face where there was no money have been incredibly useful for me in my practice.
We've got a new category here for portraits, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you have any advice? I mean, again, you've got a camera around your neck. You're saying that kind of opens doors sometimes. People perhaps will let you in. Any advice for up-and-coming portrait photographers about making those kinds of connections and creating an interesting portrait today?
Well, I think the challenge is always, as you mentioned, to get people to trust you. And, you know, I teach a street portrait class, and I think, you know, I tell the student the most important thing is be kind, be respectful, say thank you, say something nice to someone, and look them in the eye. Come with a smile. And try and be quick. That's another thing. And I've done, you know, I worked on a project to get the vote out in the midterms last election, and we were doing portraits in swing states, and we just set up like a little blanket. And some days with just me and somebody doing the writing bits. Some days I'd photograph 100 different people, and you have to make that relationship. Someone walks onto your set, and you say, "Hi, what's your name?" You shake their hand, and you just make that connection. And I think that's the most important thing, because every portrait is really a collaboration between you and the photographer. It's not the photographer that's the most important thing, it's the person. And, you know, you have to try and, at that minute, kind of read them, I guess, see who they are. Are
you suggesting you might check your ego, maybe a bit?
Yeah, that's actually really good, Julie. That is really good. Yeah, check your ego at the door. You know, it's the person that's most important, and you're jumping into their life, and, you know, there is a certain thing, you know, the whole myth of having your soul stolen when you get a portrait taken. So you're asking somebody for a favor, you better be nice about it. And that seems to work, and I think it is my superpower. You're right, because I'm actually pretty low tech, and I'm shooting a lot with a Fuji right now.
Talk a little bit about the simplicity generally of your setup.
Well, my so-called practice, and people say practice, and it is a practice because I'm still practicing, and hopefully I'm still getting better. And I've been practicing for 40-something odd years. But, you know, now I'm shooting, I have 2 Fuji bodies, and they're not expensive. They're the XT series, and a couple of lenses. And I only have 2 in case one breaks, and that's it. I mean, honestly, I don't need a lot of stuff. I still have my Hasselblad. If I get a, you know, yearning to go out and shoot some film, I can use that. But I really don't think, I find having a lot of, as they call it, gear, is just confusing because you don't know which thing to pick up first. And, you know, with digital, you're really blessed because you can shoot black and white and color and anything you want in this one shot. It's not like you have to think, oh, shall I do the Tri-X, or shall I pick up the Fuji, or shall I, you know? It simplifies everything. I like to just walk around with one camera. I think it's just fine. I really do. And worst case scenario, if it breaks, you could use your phone. And you can still take an incredible picture with your phone. I mean, it might not, well, now they have incredible phones that have amazing pixel res, but honestly, I think less is best. Plus, I personally don't like carrying a lot of heavy stuff. For what? You know? And I also don't like having a lot of people around when I'm trying to make a relationship with somebody like a 20-year-old saxophone player who's doing her first photo shoot. I don't need, you know, assistance, and, you know, sometimes it's nice. If it's a really big shoot, like you're doing Levi's campaign, you need people, because there's a lot going on. But if it's just doing a portrait of somebody, I don't think you need a bunch of people around. I really don't.
You touched on the Get Out the Vote project, is there any other projects that you've done lately that have been particularly special to you? And I also wanted to go back to perhaps what you feel maybe is your most iconic, or perhaps the image that you maybe would be known. When we all die, all the famous photographers end up with maybe a dozen pictures that people remember, despite what we would all like to think.
Really
there
true.
will be your top 12.
I
know what my top 12 is.
Oh boy.
What do you think? Maybe your most iconic?
I know. I had an exhibition at Foam in Amsterdam, and the curator, I kept saying, we're going to have to kill some of your darlings because they had too many pictures. And they are my darlings. I mean, it's really hard to say. I mean, for instance, that picture I have of Slick Rick grabbing his crotch, I'm not saying that's my most iconic picture, but some people in the hip-hop community think it's one of the best hip-hop pictures they've ever seen. You know, that's one. Obviously, the Run DMC that we've talked about. You know, and people look at the Police first album cover. It might not be my favorite picture I've ever taken, but, you know, they were just, I remember the art director saying to me, oh, there's this new punk band, they're called the Police, do you want to do the cover? And it was my first album cover. I bought my first Hasselblad for that because I needed a square format camera. And, you know, like a year later, these three punks were a stadium band. I mean, it's kind of crazy. But, you know, it's really hard to choose one. I mean...
What about the Islington twins?
Well, honestly, the Islington twins, I have a portrait of the Islington twins, and I don't know, they're right over there. I was teaching in a college in Clerkenwell, and I saw these two guys standing in the schoolyard at lunchtime. I was on the way to the pub, and I had a Rolleiflex, and I was like, oh God, these guys look so incredible. Like, there was no choice. I had to go up and talk to them. And I asked them if I could take a picture, and we started talking, and they're identical twins. It turned out that we both lived on Highbury New Park, like a couple of doors away. I took this picture of them, and it ended up being the very first issue of The Face, running full page. And then, about 10 years later, ended up being in this style show at the Victoria and Albert Museum, and they'd blown it up 10 foot high, and it was hanging in this enormous banner. And these guys, I'm still friends with them to this day. And, you know, it's really a beautiful thing. And honestly, it's my first, I would say, serious portrait. And it may be one of my, I mean, it's like your firstborn, you know. It's kind of great. And every time I go to London, I find where they are and go and take another picture of them, put it on Instagram. How
do you maintain relationships or make relationships with the kinds of people who may want to work with you or collaborate with you? You know, you're out and about. I mean, I think particularly for the photography scene in New York, you have to be present. You have to keep going to things. You've got to show your face, stay in touch with people and so on. It's not just about being online.
I think that's true. And I think, you know, it's important to go out to photography shows or even just art shows. And, you know, a while ago, I did a talk at Fotografiska for hip hop. It was for Hip Hop 50, and it was about women in hip hop. And we had this panel, which was April Walker, who styled Tupac and many, many others. Debbie D, one of the first women rappers. Vicky Toback, who did the Contact High book. And Lisa Cortez, who is a movie maker, made an amazing movie about Little Richard, for those of you that don't know about her. Anyway, so it was packed, and people were really into the, you know, a lot of young women were coming up and saying, you know, how can I be you? And we came up sort of as a team during the talk of these three things. And one was find your tribe, which is kind of like find a bunch of people that kind of think like you, people you like to hang out with that, you know, could encourage you in your work. Follow your dreams, obviously follow your passion, and then be persistent. And I think that is kind of an incredibly simple recipe if you want to be an artist. And, you know, truthfully, there's no path for an artist. There's no written journal, and it's very up and down, and sometimes you have money, sometimes you don't. But you have to believe in your own vision, and if really love taking photographs of dogs, then you should go take photographs of dogs, whatever it may be. And and I think having a posse of people, friends that you can always, Julie and I been collaborating on stuff for 30 years, and to this day, someone wants to license one of my pictures for a t-shirt, Julie will do do the whole deal for me, because we trust each other, and it's important to have people like that in your pocket. So that, and just being nice to everybody, because you don't know, someone may be obnoxious on a photo shoot, but you don't know where that person's going to go. That could be the art director of Vanity Fair next week or whatever. So you really have to bear that in mind. And I think, as a general rule, I know personally that I'm not too difficult to work with. I don't think. I'm pretty chill, and I don't really panic about stuff. And I'm not really a diva. And I know in the past, I would work for magazines. They'd be giving me something every week or every month. There's, times when there were more magazines where I'd be shooting the cover of Nickelodeon, the cover of Sesame Street, the cover, story for the Daily News. And it was just repeat people that they would just call me up because, and then, an album cover for Sleeping Bag. They'd just send everybody to me because I wasn't a pain in the ass.
So, Janette, do you want to tell us a little bit about why you think it's important for Abbey Road to be working with this photography award?
I think it's great because, back in the day, we would do a photo shoot and there would be an album cover. It would be this big, and there would be a giant poster in the window of Tower Records. And now, music photography is different because it's online or it's on Spotify and it may be this big or whatever. So for you to shine a light on that work, I think is really amazing. And they're photographers, like I know this young woman that Julie also knows called Destiny Matter. If I could just mention her for a quick minute. She's from the neighborhood, and she did a book about the black punk scene that's now in New York. And she just went for it. 5 years photographing all her friends and all the bands and everything. And then somebody, Deborah Scherer, actually published a book for her. And that kind of thing is amazing because those photos need to be seen. And they need, because they are documents of history. And all these people who are shooting bands now and have a love of music, it's really important to bring them out and be seen in a proper light, because it's not easy to get your work into, Julie, if I'm not mistaken, people come to you as a curator and ask, how can they have a show or how can they do a book? It's not that easy, although I will say zines are easy to make, and I highly recommend anybody who's listening to this who maybe wants to make a little zine. It's really inexpensive. You can do it online and send it out to your friends, because send it out to people you want to work for. Well, they should talk to each other too, as opposed to being so proprietary about their information.
Yeah, I think that's changed. We talked about that a couple of weeks ago at my lecture with a photographer who's been shooting since the 90s, and in the 90s it was very much like, because I guess people were a bit more precious about their relationships with the photo editor at Rolling Stone, and a little bit more proprietary about things. But I think as things changed, photographers also changed. They loosened up and they started to understand the value of supporting each other and sharing more.
Yeah, because I don't think they really teach that necessarily in college.
Indeed.
Even if you're lucky enough to go to college. And a lot of, really, all you need is a camera to be a photographer and an eye. I was at college at the LCP for 3 years, and I was in my rebel phase. They, at that time, the course, they wanted you to do some kind of chemistry course and this and that, and I was like, no, I'm not doing it. I'll just go off and do my own thing. And if you've got the passion, I don't think you do need to. I really don't. I think just pick up a camera and go.
You have to be good. I mean, you need to be good.
Yeah.
You know. And I don't think it's necessarily even easy to teach young photographers now, because things are changing and we have a different experience than they do, where we understood rights and there was a lot more people available to actually shoot for. And there wasn't a publicist breathing down your neck, and there wasn't necessarily someone who was going to have to approve those images before you ever did anything with them. But there is still a robust business out there, and again, you know, relationships and community, I think, are really primary, particularly perhaps more than ever. And we have the facilities to be able to be in touch with each other.
Yeah, exactly.
Janette, thank you. It's always a pleasure to sit and chat with you. And thank you to Abbey Road for giving us this opportunity and for helping to elevate music photographers. It's really much appreciated, and I'm sure the community is very grateful.
Yeah, I think I can't wait to see what people come up with and look at people's work. It's really exciting. And yeah, thanks so much for asking us, and maybe it's time for a cup of tea.
It could be time for a cup of tea.